Well, welcome everybody. Okay, just going to press the OK for the recording. Okay, so welcome everybody to the this partnership forum meeting organised by Natural Cambridgeshire. Um, I'm Roger Mitchell, and I'm chairing today, and I'm a trustee of Natural Cambridgeshire, and I'm a conservation biologist. So today we've got plants, animals, land use, and art. So quite a exotic collection. Very, very pleased to see all this. And we're going to say we've got 2 hours, so we've got approximately half an hour for each. So I hope each of the speakers will say speak for only sort of 20 minutes, and then it'll give us time for sort of the questions and discussion on what they've told us. So first of all, we have Annette Green from the University of Cambridge, and I don't know whether you remember me, Annette, but I joined one of your workshops in December. So
I do, of course I do.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
so this
I
might be quite familiar to you already, some of the things I'm going to say.
Well, good. I hope it is because I was going to say it was a very interesting workshop. So hope we'll hear some of that. So you're actually associated with the Centre for Landscape Restoration, and you're in the geography department. Right. So off you go, Annette. Thank you. Yeah, that's nice and clear. You're muted, Annette. Still. That's all right.
S Sorry, I had a bit of had to rearrange some windows to be able to see what I needed to see. Bit of yeah. Okay, it still can't quite see everything I need to see. Okay, but you can hear me. Okay, that's great. So, thank you so much for inviting me to speak about this research that I've been doing. My name's Annette Green. I'm a postdoctoral researcher from the Centre for Landscape Regeneration based at the University of Cambridge. The research that I'm going to talk to you about today is part of a body of research that I've been involved in spanning both my current role at CLR, Centre for Landscape Regeneration at Cambridge, and my previous role, which was at Edinburgh University. Where I've been across both of those roles, I've been working as a social science researcher, conducting research on the political and social dimensions of landscape and land use change. And more specifically, I've been trying to generate data that will help to better understand the diverse perspectives of different stakeholder groups in complex restoration settings, of which the Cambridge Offence is considered to be one. These icons that are up on the screen at the moment represent some of the issues related to land use and land use decision making in the UK. So we've got food security, farming, access to nature, space for nature itself, maybe specific habitats or species, housing infrastructure, other kinds of large infrastructure, people's livelihoods, energy security, green energy, all of these different questions. And these are the things that we might talk about when we're talking about land use change or how to use land in the UK. And people definitely do not always agree with each other about these things when it comes to what should be prioritised and how we use land in the UK. So I've been part of a small team of people exploring how you might use social science methods to better understand and explore people's perspectives and understand them a little bit better, particularly in restoration settings, landscape restoration settings. And this includes trying to understand those issues where people really don't agree with each other and maybe try to uncover those areas where they do agree with each other or at least align a bit in their thinking. So Me and this small team I've been part of across Edinburgh and Cambridge universities, we've been involved in designing a social science-based toolkit to try and do this to better understand stakeholders' perspectives. And it's called the Restoration Partnership Development Toolkit. And it's pretty straightforward. It basically comprises a survey, which is for perspective elicitation, so mapping out the perspectives of the survey respondents, followed by a workshop for perspective deliberation. So the idea is that you generate quantitative data, which helps you to map out your participants, your respondents' perspectives, and then you suggest which are the most contentious issue. And this data will also suggest which are the most contentious issues for those people. And then the all important second part is taking that survey data into a workshop setting, the workshop part, which is where you ask a subset of the survey respondents to discuss the results of the survey with you, with me, with each other. And this is where you generate kind of richer qualitative insights that aren't captured in the quantitative survey data. So I did this in the FENS, or an iteration of this toolkit approach. I used it in the FENS, and that's what I'm talking to you about today, my experiences of doing that. So I'm going to start by outlining a little bit about the survey part of the approach. So the survey was statement based. So you have a number of statements, in this case, 32 statements in the survey about land management and nature in the Cambridgeshire Fens. And the respondents of the survey are asked to indicate their level of agreement with each statement. Okay, so this is generating what you might know as like it data. I had 67 respondents who responded to the survey. This was quite a tightly controlled, targeted group from me. So it isn't Ipsos Mori, YouGov style polling where I'm getting thousands of responses from a random sample and then using that to, make claims about the wider population. I'm not categorically, no, that is not what I'm doing. This is a very highly targeted set of people. Most people were kind of invited by me to do the survey personally, based on their position, their kind of stake in land use in the Cambridgeshire Fens. I'm trying to sample for diversity of perspective within the group, within the groups of people that I was inviting to respond to the survey. So I was looking for land management stakeholders. Okay, we're all land management stakeholders to a greater or lesser extent, but I had to bound my sample, somehow. And basically, I was looking for government and non-government land management stakeholders in the Fens. So this is my sample kind of split into two halves, if you like. So for the government group or governmental land management stakeholders, I was targeting people primarily working at the parish and town level, so tier one local government, the lowest possible level of local government. It was actually suggested to me by a couple of people who are working in or affiliated with the Centre for Landscape Regeneration that working with parish and town councillors is a bit of an untapped resource. There may be a bit of an under-researched group who might have some interesting and insightful things to say about their experiences with land and nature and the environment. So I wanted to target them in that governmental group. And then the non-governmental land management stakeholders were basically people who were working professionally on land use, nature, or the environment, more at a bigger scale, more at the kind of landscape scale, however you want to define that. So maybe they're working in a protected area in the Fens or in a Fens-wide project. I had people who worked for example, RSPB, wildlife trusts, national trust, drainage boards, utilities, big farming businesses. And they were the kind of people who were in that non-government stakeholder group. So people who had some kind of professional stake in land management, particularly for nature, the environment, or natural resources. So this is what the survey looked like. So this is a real statement that I was asking people to respond to in the survey. So local people should be more involved in water management in the fens. And then people were asked on a scale like this from disagree strongly all the way through to agree strongly. So this closed 5-point scale. And as I said, the idea is that this generates like data, which I can do a bit of background analysis on once I get all the survey results, which will suggest to me, indicate to me which issues are issues where people tend to align in their thinking on this particular issue and where they tend to diverge. So which are the kind of consensus issues and which are the more contentious issues related to land management and nature in the Cambridgeshire Fens. So as I've already mentioned, the my sampling strategy was quite targeted and controlled. So this is purposive sampling, so where you choose the people specifically that you want to participate in your research. And as I've already outlined, I had these two groups, kind of government stakeholders and non-governmental stakeholders. So I had to collect some data basically because the survey was anonymous. I wanted to collect some kind of descriptive or demographic data about the people doing the survey, so that could reassure me in the kind of backstage area that I was getting responses from different kinds of people, from each of those two groups, governmental and non-governmental. So this was one of the questions I asked people at the end of at the beginning of the survey. So are you involved in local government at any level in Cambridgeshire? So of my 67 respondents, 38 of them said, yes, I'm involved in local government at any level in Cambridgeshire. Of those 38, they were then asked, do you hold an official position in a parish or town council in Cambridgeshire? So are you a parish or town councillor? And 31 of my respondents said yes. So this is great. This is roughly, just under half of the people in my sample said yes, I'm in this target group of, people working at the parish town council level, hyperlocal scale. Of those 31 people, this was the split across the different districts in the historic county of Cambridgeshire. So I should mention that I wasn't targeting people from Peterborough even though Peterborough is I think it doesn't count as part of the historic county of Cambridgeshire, but really it was just part of me kind of bounding my sample geographically, which I had to do in some way. So yeah, this is the split across the 4 districts: East Cambridgeshire, Fenland, Huntingdonshire, and South Cambridgeshire of my parish and town councillors. So instead of their position in the parish or town council, or sometimes in addition to, I also had respondents who were working at the district city level, county councillors or county council employees, and one person who was had a position at the combined authority level as well. And I had people responding who were portfolio holders for climate and environment, footpaths, trees, community orchards. They've had some kind of responsibility through their government role. In those things, and people mentioned being involved in neighbourhood plans, village neighbourhood plans and nature recovery plans. Someone mentioned the Cameo Partnership, IDB membership came up a couple of times, people being members of their local flood group. So this was the additional information that people gave me about themselves that kind of reassured me that I was getting a diversity of experiences, people who had a diversity of experience in the local government roles on these issues that are related to planning and nature. Okay, so yeah, 67 survey respondents, 38 of them said that they were involved in local government at any level in Cambridgeshire, which means that 29 of them said, no, I'm not, I don't hold one of those local government positions. So these are my non-governmental stakeholders. These people worked across these areas. Okay, as I said, I knew roughly who it was that I was inviting, even though I couldn't see who had submitted individual responses at the through the survey that was anonymized. But I had people who had experience working in community outreach and engagement, ecological restoration, environmental protection and regulation, farming, land management, nature habitats and species, peat, utilities, heritage planning, research, and water. So again, a real diversity of professional experience. These are the areas that people were working on in their professional roles as my kind of non-governmental stakeholders. So this is really reassuring to me because it's telling me that I've got a diversity of experiences within my highly targeted sample group, which is what I was aiming for. Um, so onto the all-important second part of the research, which was the deliberative workshops, which is where I generate my kind of richer qualitative data about the results of the survey. So I did 5 workshops in Cambridgeshire in December 2025, in March, Wisbech, Huntington, Cambridge, and Ely. So these kind of hubs across Cambridgeshire. And I had 47 participants in total, with 24 of those being from that local government group. So again, that's great. That's almost exactly half of as close as I could get to half of the respondents being from the local government group. So people who are parish and town councillors or holding all their local government positions. So in the workshops, you hand over the full set of survey results to the workshop participants. And you're asking, or I'm asking the workshop participants to help me interpret and understand and add more data to the results of the survey. They're all audio recorded, which means I have over 10 hours of audio recorded workshops, which have been transcribed, but that's the kind of bulk of the data that I'm working with. I certainly consider myself to be primarily a qualitative researcher, but there's just in this piece of primarily qualitative research, there just happens to be a bit that has some numbers attached, which is the survey data. Yeah, so that's what I did with my participants in the Fens. I'm now going to present to you some selected findings. This is what the full set of the survey results looks like. Okay, it's been deliberately blurred if it looks blurry, so don't start trying to read the text because you can't. I blurred it because I don't want the survey results to be kind of taken out of context or treated independently of the qualitative data because they're supposed to come together. But really, this is just to show you the reason why I'm not going to attempt to present the full set of survey results to you in a presentation format because it's too messy and it's too busy and there's too much stuff going on. But there will be a fuller write-up when I write this research up. The full set of survey results will be presented, as I said, with all of that context as well. So that's why I'm not going to present the full set of survey results to you, and I'm just going to go through some selected findings, by which I mean I'm going to pull out 3 results from that survey, so 3 from that list that you've just seen. Present the survey result to you and then also talk a little bit about what kind of discussions were catalysed by that particular survey result in the workshops that I ran. So this is the first example survey result. So the statement was the best way to manage land use and planning in the Cambridgeshire Fens is to let local people decide what to do. So I'll just talk through this visualisation first. So what this shows is that 16.4% of the respondents either disagreed strongly or disagreed with this statement. So this is the total, these red and orange bars here. 26.9% of the respondents neither agreed nor disagreed with the statement, and 56.7% of the respondents agreed or agreed strongly. Again, this is the total proportion of people agreeing or agreeing strongly with the statement. So I wonder what you make of this statement, what kind of thoughts this evokes for you. For me, this result was actually quite striking, because it's worded in a way that is deliberately, I think, quite extreme. It's a strong statement. Okay, the best way to manage land use and planning in the Cambridgeshire Fens is to let local people decide what we do. Okay. And despite this extreme wording, or quite strong wording, that was, as I said, deliberate, actually the majority of the survey respondents agreed with it. So this 56.7% of the respondents, and only a tiny proportion of people disagreed strongly with it. The responses that looking at the survey result evoked in the workshops did qualify this result a bit. Okay, this is why we don't want the survey results to be taken independently or out of context. The workshop data is an all-important part of the interpretation of what's going on here. So those responses qualified this statement. the discussions and workshops suggested, broadly speaking, that I think people feel like in principle it's right, so to speak, to hand decision-making power over to local people, let them be involved in the decisions that affect them the most about the place where they live and make their livelihood. But people also express a lot of concern about things like people having different levels of education or awareness about environment or nature, misinformation, climate change denial, more on that later, things like that. This dynamic is something I actually encounter quite a lot in the social science research that I do, okay? And I think it's a timely conversation to have. So this idea of wanting to hand over decision-making power on one side and really not wanting to do that on the other, that sense of conflict. I think we can talk about this in terms of like education and outreach and information delivery and giving people the right information that they need to make good decisions. But ultimately, for me, I feel like talking about that in that way tries to make this talking about education and information is almost trying to make this question apolitical. When for me, this is ultimately a political question, and it's about politics and power. It's almost like people are we saying we want people to make those decisions. We want local people to make their own decisions that affect them, but we also want them to make the decisions that we want them to want. So I'm going to show you an excerpt now from the workshop, which is actually it's about local decision making and the power and politics around it, but in a slightly different angle, one that you're probably all quite familiar with. So I'm just going to read it out. The majority of people locally, from residents through to local authority, were vehemently against the idea of the Wisbech incinerator. But the decision was taken out of local people's hands and it was pushed through by central government. So there's quite a lot of animosity and hurt feelings around that. I think that question is quite deep, quite an emotive question. A perspective would be that the significant history of the Fens is things happening to Fenland people, not with them or by them. So this is really someone saying people in the Fens are probably quite disillusioned and stung by their experiences of trying to be involved in local decision making. I think we need to be aware of that as well. Um, because there's a real risk of
5 minutes, Annette.
yeah,
5 minutes. Yeah,
5 minutes, okay. There's a real risk of frustration and disillusionment there. Okay, this is the next statement. Climate change is a serious risk to people and jobs in the Cambridgeshire Fens. Perhaps unsurprising given my sample that most people agree with this. But again, this is a political question. Let's bring it back to politics again. So one person in a workshop said, Fenland District Council don't believe in climate change, okay? And then again, this was corroborated by someone else in another workshop to an extent. Looking at local elections, a large proportion of people in the area voted for the party that doesn't really believe in climate change or things like that. So I think that indicates that, the environment and climate maybe isn't seen as an important thing by lots of people locally. Okay, again, this is related to the previous slide. This is a question of the knowledge that people have and this being related to their political positions and their beliefs, and maybe this idea of climate change denial and projecting what we think other people and other stakeholders in the Cambridgeshire Fens think and feel about nature of the environment in this extent, in this exact example, climate change, making us fearful about the idea of local decision making. Because because people across maybe it's this sense of not everyone across the whole county sharing the kind of right kind of beliefs or prioritizing the right things. And then this is the last result. Again, it's partly related. So we should help people before we start helping nature in the Cambridgeshire Fens. Okay, so most people are disagreeing with the statement. We've got this big chunk, unlike the other statements, we've got this really quite big chunk of people who say neither agree nor disagree. So they're communicating something here about this statement. They're either uncertain, ambiguous, ambivalent, maybe. Across the workshops, there was a lot of people saying helping nature is helping people in the Fens, but again, just not everyone knows that or appreciates it. It's this idea of information and people having the right knowledge and therefore making the right decisions and feeling the right things about how we should manage land in the Fens and what our priorities should be. So think again about that previous discussion about climate change. Some people don't believe in it. As I said, it's that projection of lack of knowledge, lack of awareness. But then let's look at this statement from the Cambridge City workshop. So someone said, I'm a bit guilty of this myself. We need to cut Fenland District Council some slack, actually. They're managing an area which has got some serious deprivation going on. Actually, you need to be in a comfortable place, or the majority of people need to be in a comfortable place before they can start looking at nature, because nature is seen as a bit of a luxury. Again, corroborated by someone from the Fenland, the Wisbeach workshop. I've lived in Fenland all my life, and Fenland people are only affected by what they can see and what is happening in front of them. Just the state of our education systems around here and things like that are just way off where they should be. Families have got enough problems to worry about that, frankly, too much rain, too dry is very low on their agenda. So I'm gonna finish now, and I just want to leave you with this idea of nature as luxury that we finished on that last slide. Nature as luxury. I feel like maybe this presentation has been a bit different from what you were expecting when you read that it was going to be about, land use priorities. I just want to leave you with this final idea, because this is something that was suggested by participants across a couple of this workshops. This idea that there's a lot of inequality in the Fens. There's different people dealing with different levels and intensities of social challenges in different places, which means that there's certain groups for whom nature is not going to be a priority. Okay, that includes decision makers working in local government who might not be thinking about prioritizing nature because they know that their constituents aren't. They might have other more immediate things to worry about. So this is a political question and not a scientific one for me. It's the same with people who might feel stung by their interactions with the planning system, including people who work in parish and town council level who reported in the workshops, like they feel like they're trying to represent their constituents in planning decisions, like the Wisbeach incinerator or the reservoir, for example. But they get overridden and then feel like they're in the firing line or being blamed by the people who they're trying to represent. These are probably the kind of political and social challenges that we need to deal with in some way. I'm still thinking about what that means before we can actually start thinking about collaborating across the Cambridgeshire Fens as a whole, thinking about the Cambridgeshire Fens as a whole landscape. And as I said, thinking more ambitiously about and making ecological or science-based interventions for nature in the Fens. We need to kind of overcome some of these political and social barriers and challenges first before we can start thinking about doing that. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you, Annette. Fascinating stuff. We're a bit short of time, but is there a burning question someone's got? Peter, you're muted, Peter.
I learnt last night that the corporation the government has set up to promote the growth of the city of Cambridge and South Cambs has appointed half a dozen officers, none of whom live in the county. I imagine your participants would be horrified by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And quite similar to some different work that I've been doing in Cumbria with farmers, actually. I think something that's common across the two landscapes is a sense of um, frustration, and I don't know what the other word is. Yeah, frustration about the idea of outsiders, or feeling affronted by the idea of people from outside of the landscape kind of coming in and landing and telling people what to do. Um, yeah, so that happens with, farmers in agri-environment schemes working in Cumbria, in the same way that it happens with people down in Cambridgeshire who feel like their decisions are being overridden by central government. It's this idea of like policy wonks and civil servants coming in from London and, that yeah, making decisions and telling people what it is that they should want and they should think, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Can you stop sharing, Annette? And Matthew's got a question.
Well, a comment really,
Okay.
but I completely agree with
Comment.
this issue.
Yeah.
I think, well, first of all, I think including South Cambs in your study is odd, because actually it's a very different community and different geography. The other thing to say is that I think you're absolutely right. The domination of the discussion on the future of the fens is dominated by the Environment Agency and by the water companies. And that's exactly where we have these kind of discussions. So the Fen and what Fen 2100 and so forth is very much driven by consultants from London and for the water companies and Environment Agency. And one of the problems is that the farmers, you aren't considering the people who own the land, which is the point in all this. And I think that issue about how we break out of that discussion to something where people have a more dynamic view about what they can do and doesn't get sort of dominated by London-based thinking is really important.
Yeah, agreed. Is the idea of South Cams being involved as an odd thing because it's not part of the fen, so to speak?
Yeah, it doesn't have. I mean, barring a very small part near Bottisham, essentially the fens are outside of that.
Yeah. So I did what I did in my sampling was I basically someone shared with me a list of parish and town councils that had been considered to be part of the fens based on the UNESCO biosphere application from a few years ago. So I only chose the parishes from South Cambridgeshire that were part of that because I felt quite confident then that there'd been quite a lot of work in determining whether those parishes were actually considered to be fens or at least fens edge or not, rather than just any parishes in South Cambridgeshire.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue you've got is that South Cams is kind of very much part of a London kind of community. It's much more part of that, and you're actually trying to talk this conversation with people who are not part of that discussion.
Okay.
I think it's an issue. You about your results in that way.
Yeah, I take the point. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thanks. Well, we have to move on. So again, Annette, thank you very much indeed. And could you stop sharing your screen now, Annette?
I thought I had stopped sharing it. Can you still see it?
Yeah, still see it. Yes. Yeah. At least on mine, I can.
So okay. It says that as far as I can see, I had stopped sharing it because I've got no option to stop sharing.
Okay.
But I can just exit and then rejoin the call. That might be the easiest thing to do.
Oh, thanks, Annette. Yes, if you try that, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, Bruce.
Hello, yes.
Okay. So our next speaker, we now have Art. Bruce Pearson is going to be talking about an artist in the natural world. Obviously, there's a connection between what we just heard. Another connection is, I think, Bruce, you've got some of your art in the David Attenborough building in Cambridge, where
I have indeed, and you are sharing my screen, but I can't see it.
No, it's not up yet. It's not up yet.
You are sharing your screen. Pause, share. Here it is. It's coming. There we are. Click share. I've clicked the share button. Oh my goodness.
It's saying end of slideshow. Click to exit for some reason.
Exit. Click to exit. So hold on a minute, chappies. I'm running short of time. Can you see that? No?
Yes.
So if I will put it on the big screen. Can you see that?
Not yet. Yes, no. That's good. Okay, Bruce. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to contribute to this. I'm an artist by profession, and the joke is I've never had a job, but of course I have since I left art school in the early 70s. I've worked as an artist, but I'm a passionate naturalist, a very keen birder, but as you'll see, I've done other things as well, and other things are part of my interest as an artist. But what I wanted to do was to give you a broad take on my very personal view this. I'm not speaking, I've worn a number of hats in the past. President of the Society of Wildlife in London, lectured all over the place and traveled a great deal. But this is just a personal view that I thought might tick a few boxes for you, assuming that you too are all involved one way or another in the natural world, either as field people or academics or whatever. And when Peter first got in touch, he suggested my title should be How an Artist Records the Beauty of Wildlife. And I got back straight away, because it is much more than beauty that the artist is out to, I believe. Again, please remember this is an personal view, but there's so much more to the natural world that demands we tell the story, we as artists and you as conservationists and professionals and academics. We all have to fight hard for nature. As you well know, you don't need me to say that, you know, the depletion of nature is scary, frightening, absolutely scary stuff is going on in the world, and the UK. And I think we all have to address it, and clearly we are. So that's the broad picture. And right from the very beginning, the artist engaged with wildlife by, I believe, just trying to cut through the what an animal looks like, i.e., whether it's beautiful or not, to try to reveal something in the soul of the creature. You know, can you see my pointer, by the way? I saw Alison's was a red dot, mine's a pointer, but can you see my pointer?
Yes.
So from where we all know hedgehogs have spikes. Are those on the early Egyptian hedgehog spikes? They're not spikes, they're cubes. Does it matter that they're not colored spikes, just like a hedgehog? It's still a hedgehog in my mind. And the same is true from the very earliest makings, artists creating something from nature. They were digging down to reveal something much more spiritual, something much more elemental, which is what I feel about my natural history. You know, sitting the other night in the garden, hummingbird, hawk moth. Wow, you know, so very exciting. Wherever you look, there's something to, as an artist, to engage you. But do you have to represent it as it looks like? Are we trying to convey a sense of beauty just because it looks beautiful? And that tradition, that idea that art should portray something as extremely beautiful and very romantic. The great Landseer elephant, David Shepherd's here, Dührer's hair, beautifully observed. You know, I was once told by a gallery owner that every painting should have a sense of tension, a painting about nature should have a sense of tension about it. So much so that when you look at a canvas or whatever, you turn around and look back at the piece of art and something in it has changed. A cloud has moved, a strand of grass has moved, the wind has blown a tree about. And in this case, you know, you look at the Dürer hair, you look back and you expect to see an empty space as it's just caught sight of you and hurtled off. And then art has become increasingly, I believe, through the Attenborough effect, of making, you know, nature isn't harsh, isn't cruel. It's a very lyrical and beautiful and almost, I don't mean this of the Attenborough films, of course, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But this art, painting nature, concocted from a whole series of photographs. So you're moving further away from that elemental desire to portray nature as something spiritual deep within us and something quite profound. And I wonder what, so clearly the artist here, I've no idea, I nicked it off the web, you know, what are they, sort of Siberian tiger cubs in an English, so they've got a photograph of an English beechwood, a piece of rock from the garden, and photographed it. And what's all this about? You know, it's a beautifully painted tiger, and if I tried for a million years, I'd never paint a tiger quite so beautiful. But is it more about the artist posing very gracefully with the tiger. You know, what are we talking about here? It says everything about a tiger, but says nothing at all. And so art has the potential, I believe, to go way beyond beauty and dig much, much deeper. And if you Google wildlife art or famous wildlife paintings or lovely wildlife paintings, or I don't know if this is AI generated, but if AI is ever going to get a hold on the fine art of painting nature, then heaven help us, because this is what you'll get. So this is a Google response to some question I pumped in, and there we are, a limited palette, everyone bar 10, perhaps a tiger, a bear, all facing front on. How predictable. And what does it tell us about tuskers, you know, galloping hares? Yeah, very, very nice, very beautiful, very lovely. But it ain't, some of it ain't art. But if you put in something to Google, which is much more challenging, the art of nature or the soulness of, I don't know, make your own phrase up and pump it into Google, you get a much more interesting response. You're still asking for creative responses to nature. And you have everything from Van Gogh down here, a contemporary of mine, a Carrie Ackroyd, some of you might know, the famous Goldsworthy here, contemporary artist, Tate Modern, everywhere else. So you get this rich cross-section of how we see nature, much, much more interesting, I believe. And again, it's entirely a personal statement. So it starts to, art about nature gets very interesting if you look again and see who is working from those deep roots, you know, thousands of years ago roots. So the abstraction, the looking at a piece of an aspect of the natural world, whether it be a swift, no swifts here today, by the way, a passing swift, the hummingbird hawk moth the other day. It's when you observe something and how you break it down. And this classic Picasso, so this abstraction of the very essence of the creature here, you're going down. How much further can you squeeze a response to standing in front of a bull in southern Spain in 1934? How much further can you squeeze it down and still retain the essence of a bull? Absolutely fabulous example of this, what I'm trying to say about looking at nature, and as an artist, as a creative, extracting his essence and then manipulating that essence, distilling it into a new reality. This is a contemporary of mine, Kim Atkinson, and I've got a lovely piece of work by her, and if I was a wealthy person, I'd buy everything that came from her stable. This mid-20th century Ivan Hitchens, this a contemporary of mine, Bob Greenhalgh. But what they all do, I believe, is take the essence of the animal, having observed it, and squeeze that reality, you know, overwork the reflections, dig deep beneath the water of Kim Atkinson's. I think this was actually, was Wick and Fen. What is common to all of these artists, and is at the root of what I have been doing for these past 50 years or so, is field work, being out in the field. This top left is Ivan Hitchens here, the great David Hockney, a contemporary of mine here on the Bass Rock. The great Robert Haynard, mid-20th century. He's still working now, Len Tabner, great landscape painter, and he lugs that enormous easel. I've seen it in film only, on the deck of a ship off the Western of Isles, and he wasn't literally strapped to the mast, but he was pretty damn near it as he painted Thingle's Cave from this floating platform. So, and the great John Busby, bottom right, who was a founder member of this London based at the Federation of British Artists, the Society of Wildlife, deeply involved. So what is common, I believe, to great art that tackles nature is an ability to work in the field, to confront your subject, not by borrowing 3 or 4 holiday snaps from your mates, or sitting on in your sitting room painting from last year's holiday snaps. There's an immediacy. It's absolutely fine. It's brilliant thing to do, and to occupy us in as you need to do sometimes in different ways. But for the creative arts, then my belief is that the field knowledge of the subject is absolutely crucial. And this is a contemporary, the top one, Ben Woodham's currently living and working in northern Denmark. And it's about hustle and bustle of a group of breeding eiders there. And this again is Kim Atkinson, these 2 bottom ones. But what is interesting in her work now is this absorbing, confronting nature and absorbing it creatively before you reassemble it in different parts in the studio, or you might actually be able to do it in the field, at the time that you're confronting something really beautiful and wonderful in the natural world, find some way to jiggle the pieces together. And in Atkinson's case, she started to do a body of work which I didn't see, but I know the Welsh arts, because she lives on the island of Bardsey, on the mainland overlooking Bardsey. But she's got very interested in portraying sound in pictures. So how do you visualize sound? So now you're on a creative journey, an artist who is a fantastic field naturalist, making a creative journey and turning her art, beginning to introduce sound into her art. And again, gosh, I'm out of money to go and buying pictures, but they are, in my mind, as I say, it's a personal view, are utterly sublime. And her knowledge of color, and Royal College trained, which I will come to in a moment. So this is an artist who has been trained formally, making starting out, not starting out, she's a long way into a journey where her art is really expressing something quite profound, I believe, about the natural world. And as I say, she was, Kim Atkinson's was Royal College, graduated in the early 80s. But anybody who tells you that the fine arts, any educator or academic who tells you that, we don't let children, not educating children in the fine arts is a waste, because there's no employment for them. I defy you to look at these statistics, and when a grandchild or a child or a member of the family comes and says, I want to dance, I want to play music, I want to sing, I want to be an artist, which happened to me actually. My dad I was away at school, and my dad was a military man, and I didn't fancy the clergy, the military, or law, so I'm persuading him that I needed to do art was quite a battle. But you look at some of these statistics, the creative industries, they're contributing 145.8 billion, 5.5% to the UK economic output. And this, I think, the bottom one, since I've never had a job, the UK supports 2.4 million jobs across the UK, with between 28 and 30% are self-employed. I too am self-employed, double the national average. So we let the arts, the creative arts, and in my case, fine arts, slip away uncultured within society, because nobody believes it's a very serious thing to be doing. I absolutely, profoundly disagree. And I'm looking at the watch now, 10 more minutes. And personally, how did all of those fundamental beliefs guide and steer me. I can't say that I've had them written on my sleeve as a fixed set of rules, but as I said, I went to art school and immediately came out of art school and was able to go to South Georgia in the South Atlantic subantarctic as a field assistant on a seabird program. And I was there for 2.5 years. And one of the creatures we studied, well, we studied many things, and I was merely a field hand, drawing every moment when I wasn't asked to do my help the scientists. I was out drawing, so hugely formative. So I was on this bottom right, ringing and handling and smelling. The scent of an albatross is unbelievable. If I could find a way to get that into a picture, I'd be on the way to some success, I'm sure, because it is a wonderful mustiness that is. Anyway, so I was ringing birds that were either, as this is a young female, but I was ringing chicks, and it was 1974-ish, 5-ish, and a lot of these birds would have outlived me, and one bird was ringed. I mean, and it is now, goodness knows, it's 60. We retracted it, was ringed by an earlier group on the island. But basically, I had a very close relationship, a love of seabirds. And in the intervening years, I came away and I was following the science, and the albatross populations began to plummet. And we know now, didn't know then, but now the science is there. A lot of it was caught on longline fishing. And of the 21 species of albatrosses, 19 were heading for extinction up until fairly recently, including the wandering albatross, which was my bird. I had sat on nests, I'd drawn youngsters, I'd seen them displaying, I'd taken the skulls of dead ones and drawn every element of its mandible. So they were my birds. But in the years I was away, the 30, 40 years I was away, they were becoming increasingly at risk of extinction. So what could I as an artist do about it? I had a portfolio of work which represented their lives in before the plunge in population. I wondered what would happen if I could get a portfolio of work together that reflected their lives now on the open ocean. So I had to get out on the open ocean and do what I did in the 70s and do it in the 2000s. And so I developed a project as a freelance, but I did manage to get some grant funding and a lot of supportive people through CCI in Cambridge, John Fanshawe in particular. So I spent a number of years looking again at this issue of seabirds on the open ocean, 5 more minutes, on the open ocean, and determined to do something that would support the enormous conservation efforts that were going on, that we were all aware of, BirdLife in particular. So I worked with BirdLife, and all kinds of mechanisms were at work. I owned, as a freelance artist, I had to own the book and the exhibition, and we had an exhibition in London and a reception at the Canadian High Commission in Trafalgar Square, and it was for me very special. But one of the offshoots was a book, a bound book in a case that came with a free painting. We did 100 copies as a funding supporter for BirdLife. So the whole package was, as I'm sure a lot of you do, you know, where money is tight and support is there, but nobody's got the funds to back you, particularly when you're trying to do something like this, which was quite ambitious. But so many people throughout the network of TCI and all my own private networks and the people I had touched base with at BAS, British Antarctic Survey, and elsewhere. Anyway, so that was an example of art in the service, not just portraying its beauty, although an albatross being hit by a cable off the back of a trawler, I would maintain, is not necessarily portraying the beauty of nature. It is something else entirely. So this was fine art in support of real conservation. So I wouldn't make a difference, but if I could support the people who were making a difference, whether they were doing, university surveys like Alison says, on the fens, or bird life in its broader seabird program, so much the better. And as I say, I'm part of an organization, and I was president for a while, of the Society of Wildlife Artists based at the Mall Galleries in London. And there's a current project now, which is Massingham Heath in North Norfolk. Is a landowner, a very interesting landowner, but he inherited, gosh, how lucky, but anyway, inherited 2,000 hectares, and it was carrot fields on what used to be heathland, that was ploughed up from the war up towards, much more towards north of Dereham. And when he took it over, he looked at the economics of it and could see this vast negative sum going into fertilizers on this, trying to get carrots out of this heathland. And he thought, what madness. So he turned half of it over to converting it back, rewilding back to heathland, and invited the society, wildlife artists, to get engaged in the project and to portray the changes that are now happening. He's 5 years into this, and it is absolutely astonishing. I was up there in May. But just to finish on this art as something more than just conveying this plastic Attenborough sense. I mean, they're fabulous films, but I returned to the Antarctic, and I've been on a beach where a shipload of people have come ashore and walked straight up to a breeding fur seal beach, having been briefed aboard the ship, believing it doesn't matter. I can go and pat these things because I've seen them on widescreen TV, HD definition, and nature it's beautiful, it's glorious. No, these things have ferocious temperament in the breeding season. They have the foulest mouth of any mammal. I don't know. That's non-scientific for you scientists, but they are evil. And the year I finished with came out of the Antarctic fairly recently. We passed one ship on an emergency trip back to pick up a tourist who'd had his arm bitten by lying on the beach, on a breeding seal beach, having been told not to, snuck off, and so I give up. So such is the interest in the community that we held an impromptu exhibition. I'm just finishing now, 1 minute to go. We held an impromptu exhibition. The community fed us. The owner of the land gave us some of his cottages to live in. And is that bug, whatever, I can't remember what the bug is. Is that bug a beautiful wildlife picture of wildlife? Does it portray the beauty of nature? Most people would say not, but I firmly believe that that's as beautiful as any tiger with a very tight jumpered lady standing behind very proudly beside a canvas. And on that, I rest my case. Oh, by the way, it's still available on Play when Open Country came and sat with us for the whole program and portrayed beautifully what we were trying to do, and interviewed Oliver, the owner. So if you want to find it, it's still on. And if you need to contact me about anything I've said, however controversial, or want a bit more information, there we are. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Bruce. I mean, you referred earlier to the essence of the animal. I think we've got the essence of you and your emotions through that. And yes, I think you've really made the point about, how fine art can contribute to nature conservation. Well, we are short of time, but I'm sure if anyone's got a comment that's burning or a question, we're happy to take it. I think you've astounded everybody.
I don't have a question, sorry, but I was typing out the comment, but I guess I may as well say it if there's an opportunity.
Okay,
I
Annette, carry
can't I
on. Yeah.
can't I can't get my camera back on now. I'm really
We can hear you,
technic
Annette. Carry on, carry on.
technologically challenged today. But yeah, I was just gonna say, like, despite being artistically challenged personally, I'm also a really big champion of artistic and creative pursuits, not only in this kind of in an instrumental way, which I feel like is sometimes how art ends up in the kind of conservation world, as engagement or communication or fundraising or any of these things, which are also, they're really important. But beyond that or transcending that, like art as like a way of knowing. And I'm still trying to articulate for myself and think intellectually about what I mean by that. But it's an idea that really excites me. So yeah, thank you so much for such an inspiring talk. I loved it.
Yes, I would just add to that. That's very kind, thank you. But a lot of people think that the use of the fine arts and exhibitions is a very easy way to raise money. So we've got an issue, we've got a bit of pathway or something we want to say. We'll have an exhibition and collect the proceeds, but it's quite a tangled approach to the funding of fine art. The artist cannot, almost by definition, work for anybody. So they're supporting themselves either as voluntarily or they're trying to make a living out of this. So I get a number each year of, we're incredibly worthy. We want to put a bat box up on a local reserve and we need, £400. Have you got a painting out the back of your studio that we might have? Well, I might have, but if you give up a month's salary and ask everybody else on your mailing list to give up a month's salary, then and they all do, then sure, I'll come in. But if you're asking me to rummage through and find something for you, because the fine artists really digging deep aren't supported by the very nature. They are supporting themselves. And the worst side of that, I'll finish on this, is that I once went to one of those kind of events, and clearly an artist had thumbed through right at the back of the studio, cobwebs, smudges, coffee stains on a frame, lopsided, the tape had broken, and he sent it in. He was he was towards the end of his career, let's say. And you think, no, it's doing nobody any good. Much better as Oliver, I can't remember his surname, Oliver, it comes to me, the Massingham, who's organised something, and the villagers volunteered to support this. And when we had the exhibition, some of the villagers purchased some of the art that was on show, which went round the artists and yeah, I mean, it's so that's what I would say on your point about fine arts and funding and conservation. I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sorry, Helen.
Yeah.
We have to move on ahead. I think you had a question, but I'll have to leave that. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, that was obviously very, very well received, and I think we'll be thinking about that for quite some time. What you've imparted to us. We're now moving from onto plants, synthetic plants. I don't think they're triffids. Sorry, Alison, that was a bit cynical remark. But anyway, Alison, you're going to tell us about your work on synthetic plants.
Yes, I think is it now for something completely different?
You've
Which
got a nice painting behind you as well. Whose is that one?
yes, I'm very fond of paintings. Fantastic presentation, Bruce. I'm not certain I can live up to that, but I'm going to tell you about what I do. I do get paid for it. and hopefully it will be of interest. It's nothing to do with conservation, really, but maybe it will just be a way of informing you about what people can do. I can't even spell Cambridgeshire, sorry. And sort of what the potential for this sort of technology. So I'm going to tell you about synthetic plants, the what, why, and how. I'm going to start with, I'm not going to show you hockey curves, hockey stick curves of global warming and CO2 levels and so on. I'm just going to assume that you know about the situation in terms of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but actually, in 50 years, our fossil fuel reserves will be much, much less than they are now. And we will have to think of other routes to get the things that we currently get from oil, coal, and gas. And in my view, photosynthesis is the way in which we can at least plug some of the gap. And this is showing you the energy, potential energy that you can get from different renewables. So this is a log scale on the left here. And you can see that the predicted need in 2050, this graph was done some time ago. I'm not certain if it's still accurate. It's probably more than that. But you can see that the potential yield, annual yield that you can get from other forms of renewable energy is not sufficient to meet that. And so we will need to use solar energy. We can have lots of solar panels, but we can also use photosynthesis. We use photosynthesis from agriculture, from plants, land plants. Oh, right. And in addition to food, we get lots of food. We get our food from plants. Obviously, even if we eat animals, they have to eat plants to live. But we also get lots of medicines and other beauty or personal care products. Plants are a source of oxygen, obviously, for the air that we breathe. But we use plants to produce wood, to produce other biomaterials, to produce oils, not just for food, but for lubricants and so on, for various stimulants and for materials. So plants already offer huge amounts of potential to supply things into our economy. Now, I actually don't work with plants, I work with algae, and algae are simple photosynthetic organisms. I work with microalgae, and the top three here you can see are unicellular microscopic organisms. You need a microscope to see them, but they photosynthesize. And actually, and there's another group of algae, which are the seaweeds, like this bladderwrack here. And algae contribute 50% of global carbon dioxide fixation and oxygen production. And that's because 70% of the planet is covered with water and there aren't any tropical trees in the ocean. So it's only algae that contribute over that area. And algae are already commercially used to make a variety of things like vitamins, omega-3 oils, dyes, proteins, and so on. But now they're increasingly being exploited for specific industrial uses, such as extracting dyes. And you may have heard of this company called Nopla, which is using seaweed as a source of packaging. And this is a very, it's a vibrant sector, although it's quite small relative to anything from plants. But what we do and what we're interested in is biotechnology. And the biotechnology actually includes, although it's a moot point whether it really is that, it's exploiting biological processes to do things. That's a rather vague definition. But making beer and making bread is also considered to be biotechnology. And over the last 100 years, people have started to use biotechnology to do all sorts of things. So they are, most of our so-called platform chemicals come from biotechnology in engineering microbes to make these compounds. But increasingly they're used to make food ingredients like rennet for cheese, vaccines, therapeutic proteins, and drug precursors. So this is a very big industry. And conventional platforms are basically bacteria, which is shown on the left here, or yeasts. They're very easy to manipulate. There's a very big resource and toolkit and so on to do this. But they all require sugars to grow them. So in other words, in order to produce the particular chemical or whatever it is that you're making from these organisms, you need to have grown plants in order to produce the sugars to feed them. And so increasingly in the last few years, people have turned to actually going directly to plants and engineering plants to do the same processes that you could do in these microbes. And what I do is I'm interested in trying to do this in algae, in these two microalgae here. Sorry, this is this is the basis for the ARIA project. Now, ARIA is the Advanced Research and Innovation, or Invention, sorry, Agency, which is a new funding agency in the UK. And this is backed by about, well, it's actually about £100 million from UK government. There's a Act of Parliament to say that this should be, if you like, moonshot things. Can we take the technology that we already have and rapidly change it so that it's game changing? And this isn't necessarily to do anything in the program, but it's to produce the technology, the technology that would underpin anything that you might want to do. And so there's several different themes, and one of them is programmable plants. And within that, so that's the plant side. There's things in AI, there's things in neuroscience, I think probably conservation, definitely drugs and medicine and so on. But in the programmable plants, there's a sub project which is called synthetic plants, and that's what Peter saw on the University of Cambridge website and reached out to me to see whether I would be happy to present what this is. So I'm going to give you a very, very brief snapshot of what the program is. The basic aim is to change what is possible in terms of engineering plants, reimagining a world where plants function as controllable devices. As I've mentioned before, people are starting to engineer plants to do things, for example, producing vaccines, but it's very time consuming. It takes a long time to do it. So the question is, can we speed up that process? Can we develop the technology to speed up that process? So this synthetic plants program has funded 9 different projects. 3 to make synthetic chromosomes, 3 to make synthetic chloroplasts, and 2 to consider societal aspects of the technology. So this is the schematic, which I'll walk you through, of the sort of very high level overview. So this is a plant cell here. I hope you can see my arrow at the top. Yeah. There is a nucleus, and in the nucleus there are chromosomes. There are several chloroplasts, and these are bodies within the cell that photosynthesize. That's where the chlorophyll is, that's where oxygen is produced and sugars are produced. We can, at the moment, engineer the chromosomes in the nucleus and the chloroplast. We have technology to do that, but it's sort of basically one at a time. It's this sort of serial process. So the end of the program, the idea is that there will be technologies where we can have synthetic chloroplast. The whole chloroplast can be changed, and that will speed up the whole process. And where we have also completely synthetic chromosome, which will also speed up the process. And then ultimately, the aim could be that you have completely synthetic nuclear and organella genomes. And whatever anybody says, this is genetic manipulation by various definitions, but it's also not different in principle to plant breeding, which is also genetic manipulation, although by conventional routes. The idea is to speed up the process, and we can get into whether GM is an appropriate process, but I'm just trying to be completely transparent about what it is that we're doing here. Sorry, I'm one of the 4 projects here. I've been funded for one of the 4 projects here to do a synthetic chloroplast. This is our team, which comprises groups in 4 different places in the UK, and also 2 places in the US and 1 in Germany. And together we are trying to make a synthetic chloroplast. Now, this is where I have to get a bit technical. What we do is we work with algae. So this is a simple alga. It's called Chlamydomonas reinhardtii, and it's abbreviated to clammy, which my children always found really an unpleasant name, but we think that's an very affectionate term. This is a single-celled alga. It has 2 flagella, which enables it to swim around, and it has a single chloroplast, which is this sort of green thing, sort of cup-shaped green thing in the cell. And we've been studying this for a long time, and because it's a simple system, we can manipulate it easily already, and we know an awful lot about it. So for those of you who for this is not familiar, you can just zone out at this point. But basically, it has a small circular genome, which is only 200 kilobases. Human genome is 1.5 megabases. So this is much, much smaller. But even a chromosome, if you wanted to manipulate a chromosome in the plant cell, would be 1 megabase. And in a bacterium, it's maybe 3 to 4 megabases. So it's a really simple system to test and design technologies. The other advantage is that we can mess around with its genome and the cell will still grow because it doesn't need to photosynthesize. We can actually treat it like a bacterium or a yeast and give it sugars to grow. So we can do really radical things to see whether they will work. And then if they don't work, we'll still have a live cell to know that it doesn't work, because you can do lots of technologies, but if you get nothing at the end, you don't know what's gone wrong. We can also do this very quickly. We can get the answers in a few weeks, although the people who work in my lab would say it's actually a lot more difficult than I would make out. But we already had a lot of knowledge about the plastome. That's the name given to the chloroplast genome, and we know how to manipulate it. So this is a schematic of the genome, and again, it doesn't really matter the details of it, but it's circular. It has genes on it, so each of these little coloured rectangles all the way around the outside are the genes. We know enough about it to design something which is a lot smaller. We've taken away all of the stuff that we'd think isn't absolutely necessary, and we've designed the so-called synplastome, the synthetic plastome, where we have it's still photosynthetic. The cells grow better when they're photosynthetic, but it's been radically changed from the original. And we can get it, we also think we can get it to the point where we can take away all the photosynthetic genes, which are the green ones on here, and we think it will still function, although we haven't got to that stage yet. So this is the sort of basis of the work that we're doing. I'm not going to give you any more technical details about that. But what I do want to do is to show you what we're trying to do once we've got our synthetic genome. So I'm interested in vitamins, and vitamins are, we tend to think of them, we get them from our diet. We need them for our metabolism. And vitamin B12 is this very complicated organic molecule, it's micronutrient here, and deficiency causes things such as pernicious anemia, peripheral neuropathies, but also in the developing embryo, cognitive dysfunction, and birth defects. But plants don't make this compound. And that's because they have an alternative metabolism to us, so they don't need it. So very strict vegetarians are at risk of deficiency. And although, ironically, although our our food systems have been massively improved over recent years, it's to produce calories. And actually, the micronutrient composition of our food is reducing. So as well as strict vegetarians being at risk of deficiency, there are some groups who don't have a very good diet who are also at risk of deficiency. Now, interestingly, algae, like seaweeds, like this porphyra here, which is used to make sushi, contain very high levels of B12. But they don't make it. So that's a really important thing. So plants and algae do not make B12. The reason algae contain B12 is they take it up from their environment. But that's not a very, it's a sort of stochastic process. So you can't guarantee the levels of B12. So there's interest in engineering plants and algae to make B12, and that's what we're trying to do with our system. Again, this is the sort of technical details here. This is the biochemical pathway to make B12. It's a very complicated molecule, and it actually requires 20 different genes in order to be able to synthesize it. So we are in the process of so we've got 3 modules. This contains 9 genes, this 7, and this 8 genes. We are in the process of trying to work out, using our technology to do the manipulations, can we introduce, rather than the 1 or possibly 2 genes that we can do at the moment, can we introduce 9 genes altogether? Can we introduce these 7 and then these 8? And ultimately, can we produce an alga which has got all of the genes for making B12 in it? Now, you might think, well, I don't really want to eat algae, but the technologies that we establish in algae almost certainly can be transferred to the same system in plants. It just takes, excuse me, 6 to 9 months to get a result, whereas we can do it in 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a sort of test bed, if you like. And ultimately, we're interested in doing a whole range of things. So as well as, sorry, I'll get rid of the animations. So this is what we're doing, as I've just shown you, to make the vitamin B12, but we could also consider making all sorts of other chemicals of high value. We are actively looking at how we might be able to introduce the ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen, which is what bacteria can do, but plants can't do. If we can test the functionality in our alga, we might be able to do that in plants as well, and that would reduce the need for external fertilizer. Ways to improve photosynthesis itself. This is another process. Again, both of these require lots of different genes to be inserted. And then actually also to change the genetic code completely and make novel therapeutics. There are many therapeutics which you may or may not know about, which have got really unusual chemical features. And these are really important, for example, in cancer, but also in other chronic diseases or for antimicrobials. And they have to be made in very in chemical processes which are not very efficient. Can we engineer organisms actually to make these compounds? And that would be a possibility with our approach. So I should end by telling you a little bit about, sorry, I should say all of this is we're doing it in algae. The other groups are doing it in moss, in liverwort, and in higher plants. But the other side, as well as the scientific side, there's also work to look at the societal aspects of understanding the regulatory landscape for this, doing public engagement on social and ethical considerations around the new technologies. And these include workshops, films, and reports. So that's a very extensive piece of work alongside the technologies that we're developing. So that ultimately, by the end of the program, which will be in 2030, we will have established technologies that can mean that we can engineer plants rapidly. So that in future, we might be able to engineer plants, or we would be, I think we should say, we would be able to engineer plants that would enable them to adapt to conditions such as vertical farming indoors, in desert conditions, or other difficult environments, even in space. And to make what's required, so food, fuel, building materials, or whatever. This isn't to make them, this is to develop the technology to enable that to be possible. We'd also have understanding of the regulatory landscape in the UK, but also in the EU and in the US, knowledge of ethical and societal concerns, and initiation of commercialization activities. So I hope that's given you a sense of what we do, what we're trying to do. As I said, not directly connected to conservation, but I'm happy to take any questions about this.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Alison. I'm very fond of algae myself. In an early part of my career, I used to feed Isochrysis and Tetraselmis to my juvenile mollusks, and I'm just wondering now whether we could have manipulated them genetically to be even more nutritious. Anyway, right. Anybody got a question or comments on what we've heard from Alison, which was really something quite different? I began to see the connections with nature in your last slide, actually, with deserts and things like that, with changing climates. Matthew has his hand up.
Just going back to the first presentation, how likely is it we're able to start to make plants that will sit in water and polludiculture?
Well, of course, there are plants that grow in water. Yeah. So the idea, ultimately would be to say, here's an environment. What are the features that you would need in order for productive crop production in those environments? So having studied the characteristics of aquatic plants, can we then put them into crops that we want to eat? Or alternatively, can we take the aquatic plants and make them more nutritious or tasty? I mean, to be honest, I think it's more likely, if we are going to go down this route, I think we will be doing it the other way. So in other words, engineering current crops to be able to cope with different conditions. And that's because plant breeding has happened over 10,000 years. So they're fairly well honed. And in addition, however clever our science, or even the agriculture, they've got to go into the value chains. People have got to want to eat them, processing and so on. So I don't think we'll be eating water lilies. I think we will be much more likely to be taking the characteristics of water lilies and seeing whether we can introduce those into, well, probably not wheat, but legumes or other plants that are already eaten.
And is that the timeline for doing that sort of about 10 years, or is it? What's the time?
I mean, I think the whole ARIA program is designed to speed up the development of the technology, which is to speed up being able to do this. So, and that's by 2030, so that's 4 years basically. And I think we will get to that point in 4 years, but it will take, I don't know, I don't want to commit myself, but I would imagine that new crops that will be very specialized, they won't be going over the fields of East Anglia. They will be in very controlled conditions to try and see whether we can overcome some of these difficulties. I think in another 5 years, they will be available. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Are there any further points from anybody? In that case, Alison, thank you very much indeed. That's given
Pleasure.
a completely
I'm
new slant
really
on things.
sorry, but I have to leave now because
Okay.
I've got to be somewhere else
Okay.
about 5 minutes ago. So forgive me for leaving. It was really, really, really interesting, and thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. Thank you. Okay, we're now going over to Laura Allen from the Local Wildlife Trust, who's going to talk to us about hedgehogs. We saw an Egyptian hedgehog earlier, so I think we're going to be talking about ones which are a bit more spiky and up to date, and maybe on our banknotes soon. Who knows? Who knows? So anyway, Laura, when you're ready.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll just share my screen.
Okay, thank you. No, that's okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
super. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me along today. Yes, good to hear hedgehogs were mentioned earlier, and I was going to mention about the banknote bit as well in a little while. So a quick introduction to me. Just keep moving.
We're seeing your notes screen as well.
Yes, sorry,
yeah.
Laura, you've been
Okay.
presented you.
Okay,
Sorry.
1 second.
That's
What
right.
can you see now?
That's fine.
Okay. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's okay.
cool. Yeah, so my name's Laura and I'm a community and education officer at the Great Fen Project with the Wildlife Trust. And that's a picture of me there at the wonderful Woodwalton Fen. So the talk about the Great Fen is something on its own that I could have given, but just for a bit of context to where we are. So Augusta Reserve's in between Huntingdon and Peterborough, and I'm based at Ramsey Heights Reserve mostly. But hedgehogs is what we're talking about today. So how many species of hedgehogs are there worldwide? Depending on who you talk to and what websites you look at, it can vary between 16 and 19. I'm going with 19 today with a little star there to say that we've got 2 in Europe, and in the UK we have 1, which is the Western European hedgehog. Sources differ because in different parts of the world, studies into small mammals, but hedgehogs specifically vary and are very limited. And I will touch on species and bring up a list shortly. But fossils show that hedgehog-like creatures have existed for about 15 million years. And
Sure.
today the closest relatives, although still quite distant, will be moles and shrews. So just going to bring up a list here of the 19 that I've kind of found online. I will say I don't know a lot about all of them, mainly just our European Western hedgehog, and that's what the talk is on today. But you can see some are named because of where they're found geographically, so North African, Somali hedgehog, for example. Some are based on the descriptions of the hedgehog, so long-eared or four-toed hedgehogs. The four-toed hedgehog, also known as the pygmy hedgehog, often the hedgehog you'll find on greetings cards, if you're sending gifts to people on WhatsApp, that kind of thing, and often kept as pets as well. But ours here in the UK is the European Western hedgehog. Again, when I said that there's a variation in number, it's because they used to think there was only 1 in Europe, but when closer study, it found that it was actually 2. So they called them the Western and then the Eastern, again, based on where they are geographically. I've just picked out 3 just to quickly talk over kind of for this presentation. So number 1 being the long-eared. So based on its description, it's a hedgehog with very long ears. It's found in desert and semi-arid countries because the long ears will help with heat radiation, so keeping cool in those habitats. The eastern forest hedgehog, the newest species to be found in 2018, so coming up to kind of nearly 10 years now. This was thought to be a hedgehog within the Hughes hedgehog group, but this is again where small mammals in China are not well studied, including hedgehogs, but some deceased hedgehogs were studied, and it was found that they had different shaped teeth and different shapes to their temples to the Hughes hedgehog. So the eastern forest hedgehog was named as a separate species. you've got bare-bellied hedgehog. So it's actually similar in appearance to our European hedgehog. From the pictures I looked at, it wasn't very bare-bellied, but it must be compared to ours, but found in southern India. Because climate differs to where we are here in obviously in Cambridgeshire, they will hibernate in summer, whereas ours hibernate in winter. And that's to conserve their energy because of the temperatures that they're facing. But in India, they're actually known as the thorny rat, and are under threat from things like the illegal pet trade, where they're hunted for food and medicine as well. But they'll actually try and bask, a bit like kind of a snake will here, but on the warm road surfaces at times, which means they are at risk of being run over, sadly. So yeah, under threat in India, but the bare-bellied hedgehog. But from the list I shown earlier, when kind of time allows, I'd love to look into a range of them a little bit more, because it's actually quite fascinating that we have so many different species of hedgehog, and some not well studied. The tenrec, I don't know if people have come across this before. A colleague recently introduced me to this. Is it a hedgehog? Yes or no? I can't see you to see if people nod or shake their heads, but it's not a hedgehog. So the last common ancestor that they shared with hedgehogs was 160 million years ago. They're more closely related to elephants than hedgehogs, which is one of those things in the natural world that these kind of facts are always amazing and hard to believe, but there we go. There are 36 species of tenrecs, mostly only found in Madagascar, and they can range from the size of a small dog to very small creatures that are the size of Wotsits, those kind of cheese puff crisps that we get in the supermarket, so really small indeed, but most do have a similar diet to our hedgehog here. They've evolved in Madagascar, where there is an absence of hedgehogs, and this is convergent evolution. So something will evolve to fill a void where a different species lacks. So yes, it looks like a hedgehog, but isn't a hedgehog, and actually not very closely related, but yes, closer to elephants. So just a little addition there. So back to our hedgehog here. So how many spines does a hedgehog have? They have between 5,000 to 7,000. Each measure about 2 to 3 centimeters. They're made out of keratin, which is similar to our hair and nails. And just like that, they'll fall out and be replaced. If you see a hedgehog that's lost lots of the spines, then it could be ill, but naturally they will lose some as they go about their lives. And of course, they are that very familiar key defense mechanism against predators. As you may know, and as lots of people are always pleased to hear, when a hedgehog is born, it's a hoglet, and they don't have their spines out, as that can be very painful, but they will start to quickly emerge within a few hours after birth. Do hedgehogs have a tail? Often people say no, because it's very difficult to see, but I'm afraid it is a yes. And just a few things here about hedgehog biology. So much of the hedgehog is hidden by its spines and fur around the face, as you can see in this picture. They do have surprisingly long legs at about 10 centimeters, allowing them to run quite fast. I only see hedgehogs every so often now. Quite recently in Huntingdon a couple of weeks ago, and it had been about 3 years since I'd seen one. It kind of went to run out in front of the cart. Luckily, obviously, I stopped and it ran back again. But you really do see how fast they can run. But to put that into context, their fast run is about our fast walk. So obviously, we are slightly bigger than them, but still can surprise you. They do have a tail at 2 centimeters. As they're mostly active at night, they do not rely on having good eyesight, but instead rely on their other senses, so a good sense of smell and hearing to navigate, to find mates and food. And they do have claws on their front feet to help dig for the invertebrates within the soil. We are now just going to look at their diet, which some of this may be familiar with you and some things may surprise you. So hedgehogs are generalists, eating all of these things that I've put on the screen, and the majority of the diet will be invertebrates, so our garden helper, eating slugs and snails, obviously earthworms, beetles, crickets, ladybirds, anything they can kind of get their kind of teeth round, I guess. But they will also eat frogs at certain times. I think this is more when kind of they need to, or they come across one. I don't think they're actively getting them every night. They will also eat baby rodents if they've got the chance. baby birds, which was a surprise to me. Not sure if people watch BBC Spring Watch, but a few years ago, out in a field, trail cam footage showed them eating skylark chicks, and more than one, which was something I didn't realise at all. But yeah, interesting. Perhaps they were struggling, if it was really dry, to get invertebrates in the soil, and that's when they'll go for things like that. Bird eggs, again, ground nesting birds, if they can get those, they will, and fallen fruit in the autumn. In our gardens, we often feed them, especially in our more urban areas, and we can put out things like meaty dog or cat food or kitten biscuits. But there's lots of advice online, but it's really important, not things like bread. It's not got much nutritional value for them, but never milk, because actually they're lactose intolerant, so we'll make them quite poorly. So small dishes of water are fine. But these days there is lots of, even in our supermarkets, you can buy hedgehog food, branded as such, or in our garden centres. But really, yeah, generalists, looking for invertebrates and things within our gardens. Very helpful if you're growing your own food, if you're getting those slugs and snails for us. People can be quite creative in how they feed hedgehogs within the garden. These are just two examples from online. So in plastic boxes, because often people are worried that their cats might eat them, eat the food, not the hedgehogs, getting extra food, extra meals, etc. So people will put these boxes together. Small CD-sized hole, 13 by 13 centimetre gap in the box there, with the dish inside, small dish of water outside, and then some sort of weight on top to stop your cat, or if you've got a friendly fox coming in, or badger trying to tip that over to get the food inside for themselves. As I mentioned, you can get hedgehog food from supermarkets and garden centres, and you can actually now purchase, which I think is quite expensive when you could just do it the plastic box method, but some feeding stations. So again, just a few examples found online if anybody's interested. We're going to do a whistle-stop tour of the life cycle of a hedgehog now. Some of this might be familiar to you, perhaps not to everybody. We start in the spring, so adults will emerge from hibernation between March and April, and they're looking for food as they need to put lots of weight back on after the hibernation period and before they start to breed. Between May and June, so now, is when the rut takes place, which is when males try to impress the females. This is when they'll often circle one another while snorting. So on those really hot nights that we had a few weeks ago now, if you had your windows open, you might have heard them, if you're lucky enough to have them in the garden. Obviously, with this snorting sound, it will attract other males to come into the garden, as they'll try and rival the original male with headbutting, chasing, this kind of thing. They do not usually fight for territory, but they do have home ranges that they like to keep to. So there have been research that you can see online, and it has kind of GPS I don't know if they're GPS tagged, but that kind of map appears to show you where hedgehogs go within a certain area of a neighbourhood, and you can see they do cross over, but they do tend to stick to their own home ranges. Hedgehogs will roam for up to 2 kilometres a night looking for food, but males at this time of year can go up to about 3 kilometres as they're looking for food, but also a mate. Skip forward a few weeks' time, so June to July, that's when our first round of hoglets are born. The average litter size is 4 to 5, but they can have as many as 7, although the success rate of weaning them is about 2 to 3 hoglets. If you're lucky enough to have hedgehogs nest in the garden and have young ones, I'm sure you know it's really important that we don't disturb them, although it can accidentally happen. There are 3 kind of outcomes to this. So one, the mother, if she can, will relocate the nest, either get them to follow her or pick them up and take them herself. She may sadly abandon the nest, which is when we would then try and collect the hedgehogs from our gardens and take them to like a local rescue. So I used to volunteer at Shepref Hedgehog Rescue Centre. Or in the very worst case scenario, the mother may actually eat her hoglets because of the risk of us humans. But yeah, that's in kind of hopefully the worst case scenario, and if possible, she'll try and relocate them somewhere else to a neighbour's garden or just down a little bit further down if possible. They'll leave the nest as a group at 3 to 4 weeks old. They'll start to follow mum around, learning how to forage, where to find food. The male isn't involved with rearing the hoglets at all, so it's all down to the female. And once kind of 3 to 4 weeks later, the hoglets will start to just disappear off on their own, find their own territory, and kind of prepare themselves for the incoming autumn. Oh, just be a little video here. So as we go into the summer, the hedgehogs need to eat enough to reach a suitable hibernation weight ready for the incoming autumn winter. There's no guaranteed survival weight, but it's suggested that around 450 to 600 grams for a hedgehog is a healthy weight to be able to survive over that period. A female may have a second litter, which will be born in September, October. This often puts pressure on the female to put that weight back on, because they'll have a shorter window to feed up before hibernation. But it also means that those 2 to 3 successfully weaned hoglets are also under increased pressure. They've not had since July, for example, to feed up before their first hibernation period. So do keep an eye out for them as we go later in the year, in case a second litter is had in your gardens. Oh, as we go into autumn, it's all about feeding up, whether you're a hoglet or adult, and finding a suitable hibernation spot. It could be in your garden, bottom of the shed. It could be under log piles, leaf piles, around a compost bin, wherever they can find shelter and warmth. But you'll see them start to take in that material over the weeks into the autumn until we get to winter. So in winter, hedgehogs go into what people will say is hibernation, but it's often just a state of torpor. So it's not a constant sleep. They can appear at times. So you should, as I'm sure you know, often report if you see a hedgehog out in the day and check that it's not dehydrated, that kind of thing. But in the winter, they may come out of their hibernation state to get extra nesting materials or perhaps find some food. And I'll just bring up some information on screen. So during this period, the heart rate decreases significantly from 190 beats per minute to just 20. Their body temperature decreases. They're trying to match the surrounding temperature where they are, so from around 35 degrees to 10 degrees. And the ideal temperature for hibernation outside is 4 degrees. When it's warmer, they're using up more of their fat resources to try and keep their body at a lower temperature. So yeah, 4 degrees. So impacts of climate change and things mean that if we're getting warmer winters, hedgehogs are actually choosing not to hibernate in some cases already. There's maybe plenty of food that they're still able to access, or they just don't need to. So that's becoming more common, but obviously keep an eye out for a sign that they're still healthy hedgehogs, but they may just appear in your garden to look for some food or to bring in some more nesting material to wherever they've chosen to hibernate over the winter. But yeah, in some cases and potentially in the future, hibernation will become less and less common with climate change. The respiration also slows from to one breath every few minutes. So yeah, it does look like they're not breathing, but they are. It's just very, very slow. So we're just going to have a quick look at hedgehogs in numbers. I'll bring a few up on screen here. So the population estimates vary due to a lack of reliable methods in this. Some people do the footprint tunnels within your garden. Obviously, you can go out at night and try and find them. But the population estimates in the 1950s was at 36.5 million hedgehogs. Between 1995 and 2007, this had declined significantly to 1.5 million, hedgehogs. And then the most recent data as shown here on screen in 2018 was actually less than a million, 879,000 hedgehogs in England, Wales and Scotland. The biggest fatality period tends to be in July with hedgehog road deaths. Throughout the year, it's estimated from Nottingham Trent University in 2020 that there was 335,000 hedgehog fatalities on roads. This was an increase from an estimation before that of 100,000 hedgehogs. But July is the busiest period because that's when I go back to earlier when I said about hoglets will start to become independent. That's when mum is back out there, maybe looking for a new mate or starting to find food again. But you could have the 2 to 3 hoglets from every nest going out there as well. So lots more hoglets around and hedgehogs. So that's when July. So please be careful over the next few weeks as we head to that period. But yes, hedgehog numbers have declined significantly, as I'm sure we know. But it's now looking that they are starting to kind of flatten out or improve in urban areas, but unfortunately in rural areas still on the decline. There are lots of threats, and I'm sure these are familiar to us, and I'm sure lots of us try and help hedgehogs where we can. And I'm not going to go into them into too much detail in the time that we have today. But obviously, hedgehogs are associated with hedgerows. but we've lost lots of that habitat. So we've lost 50% of hedgerows in 75 years, which puts pressure on the hedgehog to find alternative sites for hibernation, for nesting, and kind of areas of food. Urbanisation, habitat fragmentation, we've already just touched on the previous slide about road fatalities. Lots more cars on the road than there would have been when you go back to the 1950s, of 36 million hedgehogs estimated. But yes, things have changed. Loss of hedgerows being a significant one of those. Other things people often talk about is the fact that we like tidy gardens, or lots of people like tidy gardens now, which again is taking away that habitat from where they may have previously have come to find space, food, mates within our gardens. Badgers, I often get the question of, but there are badgers coming to my garden or in the area, so there are no hedgehogs. The hedgehog-badger relationship is quite complex, but badgers and hedgehogs can coexist, and you'll often see, again, this time of year, spring watch and things, showing clips of them all in the same space, trying to feed from the same bowl that we've put out. But there is competition for food. So badgers will eat 5 times the amount of worms compared to a hedgehog. So they are outcompeted. There can be confrontations. Badgers can eat a hedgehog. They can cause a bit of harm. Obviously, the hedgehog's got the spines to try and protect itself, but a badger could actually kind of turn them over and unfortunately harm them and kind of eat them underneath. Badger numbers are increasing, so this could become more common. It's estimated that we've got 485,000 badgers in England and Wales now. But alongside badgers, you've got potential confrontation at food sources from foxes, although quite often a hedgehog can kind of use those spines to kind of push them off and scare them away a little bit. I found it really interesting that badgers create this landscape of fear when it comes to hedgehogs. So rather than actually harming the hedgehogs, it's just this landscape of fear. So a hedgehog will know badgers in the area and actively avoid going there instead. So that's where people may say, I don't have any hedgehogs, I've got badgers, and it's not that the badgers have eaten them all or harmed them all, it's this landscape of fear where hedgehogs have actively avoided it and gone, no, I'm going to go somewhere else instead. So yeah, really interesting. We can help by having wildlife-friendly gardens. It helps lots of species, not just hedgehogs. It brings joy to us, the benefits of being closer to nature on our doorstep. But by providing areas of, we'll go for this picture here actually, areas of wildflower meadows, long grass, things like that, they can find plenty of food in. They can also hide in themselves. A source of water, especially when we're having these really, really warm summers and heat waves, making sure there's a source of water. This is a picture of a pond. It could just be a small dish. Hedgehogs can swim, but not for very long, and they need to be able to exit the water. So that's what my little star there is for. So stepping stones to be able to get into the water, little ramp, for example, daily check if you can. But yeah, source of water, and that may be where they're getting the frogs from if they fancy one. Log piles provide us shelter from the heat, but also that hibernation spot or nesting spot at certain times of the year. Gaps under sheds, again, the same thing. Or holes in walls. So hopefully you heard of hedgehog highways. You can create one in your garden. You can register it online with Hedgehog Street and the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. But it's about connecting up the landscape, trying to allow hedgehogs to travel in their own kind of green highway between our gardens, university grounds, colleges, nature reserves, etc. So they don't have to go near the roads that we've said is a threat already. We can help patch up the habitat rather than have it fragmented for hedgehogs, and obviously other wildlife will benefit as well. And hopefully if this plays, you'll get an example here of a little hedgehog highway in somebody's garden. Just going to go through. There we go, hedgehog highway into the kind of the scrubby bit next door, and hopefully have somewhere to find food and a mate, but keeping safe. So hedgehog highways, really, really good. Yeah, connectivity. And of course, providing them supplementary food and water, as I touched on earlier. And there has been research to show that a lot of people again say to me, what about if I go away for a while and I don't feed them, what are they going to do? It's actually had research to show that hedgehogs will use your food as supplementary. They're not relying on your food source, so you can go away and not worry too much. But yeah, just making sure it's not milk because of that lactose intolerance. So yes, that kind of rounds out my slides. Oh, you can also provide them at home. So this one, hedgehog boxes. If you'd like to or just log piles and things. Again, research has actually shown that they like it if your hedgehog box has a dividing wall, because it protects them from the arm of a fox or a cat that try and scoop them out, because you can't get through the second wall. A little bit of safety there. I can't remember the results of it, so you can look it up if you're really into helping the hedgehogs in your garden. There's also a direction in which they prefer the box faces, like north, south, east, or west. I can't remember which one it is, so do look it up online. But yeah, lots of interesting research for hedgehogs going on in the UK, if you're really looking to help them with within your own green spaces. Thank you very much. That's a whistle-stop tour and a general overview on hedgehogs.
Well, thanks, Laura. Yeah, that certainly was a whistle-stop tour. We've learnt you packed a lot of information into that. And unfortunately, I live in a landscape of fear. I've lived in the same house for 50 years. I had lots of hedgehogs, and now I have lots of badgers. Both very nice animals, but I
Yeah.
miss the hedgehogs. One question, when you mentioned hedgehog highways, one question I saw in the chat was, how do we prevent cats using hedgehog highways? Is there anything to do with the size of the hole or dimensions?
Yeah, so it's just that all they need to be, they don't have to be as big as the one in the video, but 13 by 13 centimeters. That's the recommendation, I think, by the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. It's the old CD case, but when you talk to younger audiences, they might not know what that is anymore. But the old CD case. And then some people will say, but I've got a dog or something, and what if they escape? People have suggested that you can just make a little gate that you just open at night time. Hedgehogs being out at night time, kind of hook it up, and then when your dog's out in the day, you hook it down. So there are creative ways around it.
Thanks, Laura. Are there any further comments, questions? Anybody? Can't see any. I think you've astounded us and and you've given us all the information we needed. Okay. So, as I said earlier, I think it is one of the animals chosen for banknotes. I'm not sure it's got on the short list, but I think there's a chance to vote for the hedgehog. Maybe having heard your lecture, your presentation, Laura, more people will vote for the hedgehog for our banknotes, particularly as it's the numbers are going down at the moment. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, we've got 2 minutes to run, so thank you for your timekeeping, all the speakers. I'd like to thank the speakers very much indeed. I think that was a most interesting and very diverse group of speeches this morning, presentation this morning. So many thanks. Thanks to Peter Anshoff for putting this together, and many thanks to you all for attending. Do we have a date for the next one, Peter or Becky? Or is it to be? I can't. No one's telling me. Anyway, you're all on the mailing list, so if when there's a date for another forum and indeed a program, you'll get to know, and I hope you'll all attend. So many thanks.
I think it's the
And
9th of September.
9th of September. Okay.
It's the
Right.
Wednesday anyway.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Okay, so I hope to see you all and more on the 9th of September. So thanks again and goodbye. Bye.
Thank you, Roger, for your chairing. Very efficiently as usual.
Thanks, Peter. That was a very